the American people stand firm in the faith which has inspired this nation from the beginning. We believe that all men have a right to equal justice under law and equal opportunity to share in the common good. We believe that all men have the right to freedom of thought and expression. We believe that all men are created equal because they are created in the image of God. From this faith, we will not be moved.
Hello, God bless America, and welcome to the Freedom of Thought podcast. I am your host, Paladino Joey, or Joey Awajan. Freedom of Thought is available on all of your favorite podcasting apps, featuring Spotify, so if you can download and listen to the show via Spotify, it would help, but otherwise, it's totally fine, whichever app you prefer versus others. Thank you once and always for downloading and listening to this show. It is an absolute pleasure to be back on board with you once again today as we celebrate our Independence Day once again in 2023, July 4th, 2023. Indeed, God bless the United States of America. 247 years in the making since the Declaration of Independence was signed by 56 individuals that risked their lives in front of standing armies from the British all over the place. That's what a lot of people don't really put into perspective, just how dangerous and how risky it truly was when these men, these brave men, stood up to the British and said, no more. It was literally right there. Like right there. Imagine British forces, or whichever forces there are right now in a lot of ways. Just they're all over the place, standing armies all over the place. Imagine right here in Golden Valley, there's powerful British forces all over, City Hall, and all that. And imagine we're in City Hall there and signing the Declaration of Independence. We are independent from you. Get off our land, basically. You're no longer going to control us. Imagine that from people here in Golden Valley, Minnesota, or in Minneapolis, Minnesota, doing something like that. Or in any other state, New York City, Massachusetts, wherever. Philadelphia today versus back then. Pretty dang crazy to think about, and I don't imagine our Congress having balls of steel like they did back then. I just can't imagine, because literally your life is risked. So many people were affected with what happened there. Families were divided, families were lost, this and that. Not divided because they fought against each other, but because the British and the declaration of war that was basically taking place on July 4th, 1776. It is an incredible thought. Again, 56 delegates signed the Declaration of Independence, including John Hancock, who wrote it very big and very beautiful. He has the largest signature there, and that's why people always famously say, sign your John Hancock, please, because he was basically like, yeah, I'm proud of what I'm writing here. I'm proud, very proud to say, you know what, this is our country now. You're not going to control us anymore. So, absolutely amazing. John Hancock has one heck of a signature to it. It is beautiful. I'm looking at, again, a digital image of the actual Declaration of Independence, a unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America at the time. Interesting, too, how the construction of the colonies was so different back then in a lot of ways. So it's actually fascinating. And, of course, Wikipedia will cite what they have here. Interesting, actually, how in that time, obviously, states were larger, like New York looked like New York, New Jersey looked like New Jersey, Delaware, so to speak. They look like the Delaware you see today, the shape, Maryland, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and all of that. But apparently Connecticut branched into part of Philadelphia, too, so kind of interesting, in between, like with New York kind of in between. And Maine was Massachusetts back then. I guess that's where you could imagine Maine. There's just kind of a Massachusetts vibe in Maine. I've noticed that over the years. But apparently Minnesota, part of Minnesota was in the 13 colonies, if you can believe it, and Wisconsin and Michigan, Virginia. We were basically Virginia. So there's a city in Minnesota called Virginia, Minnesota. Maybe that's where that came from. Interestingly enough, Georgia was much larger as well. It kind of branched about into the northern parts of what would be Alabama and Mississippi. Not quite to New Orleans. Louisiana, not New Orleans. Louisiana would pop up a little bit later, particularly after the war and all of that. But Minnesota, like Duluth area, kind of like the North Shore, all the way up to, you could say, Voyageurs National Park, kind of areas like that, was actually part of Virginia. Pretty interesting. Much later it became, or not much later, but later, we were a part of the Louisiana Purchase. So it looks like the Mississippi River was a dividing part of what was going on. That was the agreement with the Native Americans at the time. So a little perspective of how the construction of the United States was at the time, the 13 colonies and such. But again, the bravery of these men need to be remembered every day, rather than coming out and talking about the only thing people can talk about, and obviously when they tear down statues, and all that of Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, John Adams, people like that, historical figures, even Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses Grant, which makes completely zero sense during the whole George Floyd riots. Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses Grant, really? Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses Grant? It's just ridiculous. And again, the bravery of these men, if they didn't have this type of bravery and this willingness to risk their lives, this country wouldn't exist. And it was just a different breed back then. People had guts. They weren't on their phones, staring at their phone, basically like, oh gosh, why is my connection not a little bit better, or something like that, or oh, how come more than 10 people didn't like my picture? What the heck is this? Yeah, they had a little bit higher priorities in their life than that. So definitely something major to put in perspective on this day, July 4th. Yeah, 2023, going back to 1776. It's just absolutely crazy. The Declaration justified the independence of the United States by listing 27 colonial grievances against King George III, and this is from Wikipedia, and by asserting natural and regal rights, including a right of revolution. Its original purpose was to announce independence, and references to the text of the Declaration were few in the following years. Abraham Lincoln made it the centerpiece of his policies and his rhetoric, as in the Gettysburg Address in 1863. Yep, the whole floor score and 7 years ago. Again, 87 years ago. Yep, literally, at the time, 7 years ago. Yep, that they stood up, they recognized, and they wanted it of the people, by the people, and for the people. So yes, that's what this country was for, and that's what it was all about. And it's obviously such an important, integral piece of this country. Again, it's heartbreaking to see where a lot of people stand in this day and age. It's heartbreaking to go to a park and, heck, it's like 80% of people that barely speak English nowadays, celebrating July 4th. They don't even care. They're not here they don't care about July 4th. They don't know anything about it. And if they do, good for them. A lot of them don't seem to. It just seems like a completely different world. And I don't mean that foreigners don't deserve to be here. It just seems like the wide open borders are not something that any country really should be all about. It's okay if people come, but not at the pace that things are going. I'm not sure this is what we were really planning on at the beginning. And you could name every country on the rest of the planet. Their borders are a lot stricter than ours, except maybe like France and Canada and stuff. The Declaration of Independence was signed by 56 delegates to the Second Continental Congress, who came to be known as the nation's founding fathers. The 56 delegates from New Hampshire, Massachusetts Bay, Massachusetts Bay, not Massachusetts, is different, it's much larger actually, Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, which is again part of Minnesota, it stretched all the way to Minnesota, and years later, Louisiana stretched all the way into Minnesota. Pretty crazy, the Louisiana Purchase. North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. The Declaration became one of the most circulated and widely reprinted documents in early American history. The Committee of Five drafted the Declaration to be ready when Congress voted on independence. John Adams, a leading proponent of independence, persuaded the Committee of Five to charge Thomas Jefferson with writing the document's original draft, which the Second Continental Congress then edited. The Declaration was a formal explanation of why the Continental Congress voted to declare American independence from the Kingdom of Great Britain a year after the Revolutionary War began in April 1775. Yeah, so it actually was during the war. I remember now. Yep, 1775, the Lee Resolution, but that's when things kind of intensified even more than ever. Like, yeah, we're done here. The Lee Resolution for Independence passed unanimously by Congress on July 2nd, 1776. After ratifying the text on July 4th, Congress issued the Declaration of Independence in several forms. It was initially published as the printed Dunlap broadside that was widely distributed and read to the public. Jefferson's original draft is currently preserved at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., complete with charges made by John Adams and Benjamin Franklin, and Jefferson's notes of changes made by Congress. Yep, pretty awesome, no doubt about it. And Thomas Jefferson, again, had some amazing quotes over the years. For I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man. So, yep, over the mind of man. Do you understand what that means? Again, like freedom of thought. You understand? So, in a lot of ways, Thomas Jefferson right there started the Freedom of Thought podcast, many years before. No, in a way, but that's kind of what this is all about. Eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man. So, like, again, how you have freedom of thought. You shouldn't be forced to think a certain way. And I stand upon that so strongly. So it is obviously one of the most amazing quotes in the history of the United States. And I stand by that in a big way. It is interesting to note how Jefferson and John Adams were actually rivals politically. They were kind of different in a lot of ways. I mean, John Adams would be thought of as, I don't know, maybe a little bit more staunch, so to speak, on certain things, where Thomas Jefferson might have been more, you might call it liberal, but it's a different kind of liberal. It's not the liberal that you think of today. It's not the liberal that you think of the 1960s or anything like that. A very different kind of liberal, more like libertarian. Thomas Jefferson would be very conservative today in comparison to any type of liberal. I mean, very. There's no doubt about it. But it was actually libertarian in a lot of ways, which is, totally fine. I can't imagine him supporting abortion. I certainly can't imagine him supporting gay marriage or anything like that. I can't. There's a reason why that was never written in any type of like Bill of Rights or anything like that, because, well, they never thought about it. It's that simple. They never thought about it because they didn't think we'd be this crazy all these years later. I mean, that's the reason why it wasn't written there. It's not because, nope, it's okay. No, that's just a game that people like to play in this world, and it's unfortunate. But no, that's what it's all about. July 4th is all about the freedom of thought, the freedom of, just freedom in general, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, first of all. I mean, that's like the First Amendment, freedom of speech. So it's like, hello, freedom of speech. I mean, obviously you don't want to say crazy things. You don't want to pick fights with people, but at the same time, people do have freedom of speech. And that's something that seems to be being taken away day by day. Freedom of thought and all of that. So think about these men on this day, again, that risked their lives and lost their lives in a lot of cases. I mean, a lot of people died in the Revolutionary War. There is no doubt about that. What also might show you how much smaller the population was back then. But throughout the course of the war, an estimated 6,800 Americans were killed in action, 6,100 wounded, and upwards of 20,000 were taken prisoner, which would be terrible. Historians believe that at least an additional 17,000 deaths were the result of disease, including about 8,000 to 12,000 who died while prisoners of war. So obviously a lot of people lost their lives. A lot of people were wounded. Lives changed forever. Even like minor wounds can last forever. And they might seem minor to some people in comparison to getting killed in a war. But I mean, still, maybe like permanent injury to your foot, your ankle, your hand, this and that. You're not able to walk like you used to, that type of thing. Maybe just literally like what a disabled person would be today. So, and obviously all the mind bleeps that a war can give you. Because back then, believe me, scary then too. Obviously like pilots in World War II had nightmares pretty much the rest of their lives. All the scary things that took place during flight, particularly going up against like battleships or other aircrafts and such in those terrifying wars in the air and against battleships and such. Whew. I mean, yeah, nightmares that last a lifetime. That last a lifetime. And just imagine being out on the field there, out in the war. I mean, in the Revolutionary War, where obviously medical attention was not what it was, not anywhere near what it was even by World War II standards compared to today. Frightening, absolutely frightening. And again, it does show how much smaller the population was back then in the United States of America. But again, still, lots and lots and lots of people did die, without a doubt. Civilians, obviously, there was a number of civilians as well that would die in the war because just things happen. So things happen, things go wrong. I don't see an actual number. Estimated around 25,000, it looks like. So that's a lot. That's a lot. So chalk that in as well, because maybe a lot of those civilians also fought. A lot of those civilians probably also fought as well in a lot of ways. Like they had to stand up, and there's nothing they can do. Their house is being raided by the British. So I mean, or their town, their village, whatever's being raided, this and that. So obviously, with the United States, the colonies being much smaller. Obviously, there were a lot more villages then versus like small towns like Golden Valley, which used to be a village many, many years ago as well. So that's definitely something to think about. Yep, it took like around a month or so to create the Declaration of Independence, because there's a lot of create and edit and all that. But then it was ratified on July 4th. That's why we celebrate Independence Day officially on July 4th, even though I guess July 2nd. Apparently, it was kind of like pretty much ready to go. It was that was when it was officially passed unanimously by Congress, but then it was ratified. Like, here you go. This is our Declaration of Independence. Here it is on July 4th, 1776. The answer to 1984 is 1776, as famous people will say, like including Alex Jones and such. Absolutely amazing. Yep. Other things of note, you could say again, like we said, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were actually political rivals. They died on the same day. It was within like an hour or two of each other, interestingly enough, in their 80s in 1820. So, of course, after the 1812 war, the War of 1812, as they say, when the British tried one more time to get us back, basically. They tried one more time, and we were stronger by then, and it was like, nope, that's enough, basically. I do believe the White House was burned, though, unfortunately, during the course of that time. Not completely, but it was damaged pretty bad, unfortunately, by the British. Another thing of note that I think is interesting, it might not interest everybody, but it's something. I had a classmate, I don't know if he's a listener of the show, maybe not, named Nate Lindholm. He was in my class around like 8th, 9th grade and such when I went to Maranatha Christian Academy before I unfortunately left, because it's just too expensive, unfortunately, and I can't expect my parents to dole out thousands of dollars every year. Public schools are not good, but back then they weren't as bad as they are now. Anyhow, to the point, Nate Lindholm is a direct descendant of John Adams, and of course that would mean John Quincy Adams as well. So he's a direct descendant of two presidents. Isn't that amazing? So John Adams, John Quincy Adams were ancestors of my classmate Nate Lindholm. Very good basketball player and an outstanding baseball player. Kind of a Jeter type of player who played shortstop and just smart hitting and this and that. That's the kind of player I would have compared him to, as a Jeter type. Honestly, a tall shortstop kind of guy who could flicker. He could just freaking play. Like, he was a great player, great fielder, great timing with the bat and all that. So I just think it's cool, and he was I admired him as a baseball player more than basketball. He was good basketball, but baseball, he was just unbelievable. And just to think that he was a direct descendant of John Adams and John Quincy Adams. So I always find that pretty cool, to the founding fathers. I believe he's the only person I ever really knew that was a direct descendant to one of the founding fathers, or in this case two, because of obvious reasons. Obviously, his name was not Adams, but names change over the course of time for reasons, of course. Interestingly enough, I'm a direct descendant to Simon Willard, who first, from my mom's side, of course, not my dad. My dad was the first general. His parents with him came here not his dad, unfortunately. He died in Lebanon at a young age in the 1960s. My grandfather, so I never got to meet him, but his mom came here lived in Virginia a little bit too, ironically, but here, my grandmother, in the 60s. So like right after the father died, my grandfather died, my dad and grandma and other parts of the family came here from Lebanon. But from my mom's side, dating all the way back to 1835, Simon Willard came here from England. So pretty cool. Like Kent, I believe, is where Kent or possibly Wales is where he came from, but it sounds like Kent. And I'm a 12th generation, so we're talking like 10 greats back, I believe, or would that be 10 or 9? 9 or 10 greats grandfather, Simon Willard, and he's over there in like the East Coast, like Massachusetts, maybe a statue or something of him. So he's an important person too, going way back. So he was long gone, way before the Declaration of Independence or anything like that. So it's just amazing how far back the colonies go. And it's kind of cool to know that, that's some of us may have ancestors that go back that far. So it's an honor. It's an absolute honor. I think that's really cool that Nate was a direct descendant of John Adams and John Quincy Adams, and of course Samuel Adams, which is, a lot of people know that as a famous beer from Boston, Massachusetts, Boston Beer Brewing Company. Samuel Adams, of course, relative of John Adams as well. So pretty cool. He was the 4th governor of Massachusetts as well. So there you go. That makes perfect sense in a lot of ways. So he was a founding father. So second cousin. Okay. So I wanted to know the exact. I knew it was a cousin, but I guess second cousin to John Adams. At the end of the day, so interesting, of course, to Democratic Republican, okay. Born in 1722, holy cow, died in 1803, so he was actually the older one. So John Adams was actually, interesting. John Adams was the younger one when it came to the whole second cousin thing, because John Adams died in 1820 in his 80s, so that would put him in the 1740s, of course. He left office in 1801, did John. Unfortunately, only 4 years. He was the first president to last only 4 years, even though he was just the second president overall. So, definitely. I know I'm kind of rambling and going on and on, but I admire history. I love history. I'm a history buff, to say the least. I'm sure I'm not the only person, possibly, that might be listening to the show that would be a fan. 1826 he died, okay. July 4th of all days, too. It's fascinating. July 4th of all days, 1826. So it wasn't 1820, it was 1826. So a few years later, 1735. So definitely later than Sam. Yes, so getting our exact numbers all in order. Apologize, I'm kind of all over the place. So, definitely though, stuff that I appreciate and admire, and there's no doubt about that. July 4th, 1826, with Thomas Jefferson. He was actually the youngest of the whole bunch, interestingly enough. 1743. In his case, yes, I know these are numbers. They're not necessarily that important to the exact year that people were born and such, but I suppose that might be my cue to kind of move on here. Apologize. But it's important to remember and recognize what July 4th is all about, rather than just fireworks, beer, hot dogs, apple pie, burgers, whatever the heck it is. Oh, beer, oh, fireworks, oh, sparklers, oh, time to drink, time to party. No, it's time to recognize the Founding Fathers and the risks they took. Risking their families, risking their lives, risking their futures, risking their careers. Because some of them worked side by side with the British because, well, they kind of had to. Like a career type of situation. Like, what if you worked for British people? What if you worked for, like British, important British people? What if that was the company you're working for? Well, sorry, bleep you, time to go. That type of thing. That'd be kind of scary, wouldn't it? To just kind of up and just kind of pull out and say, no, we're done, sorry. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to do. It takes guts, and it takes a willingness to change. And you know what? Thank you. Thank you, Founding Fathers, for standing up. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you so much for listening. God bless every one of you. And once again, God bless the United States of America.